States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. First item up is review of the minutes, review and approval.
Move to approve.
Second. 2 seconds, please. Jimmy, you were first. I thought you were first, you were second.
I made the motion.
Oh, okay, guys, okay, that's two back, okay, guys. You get that. All right, motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, public comments. Seeing that there is none. Next up, the new business, which is our annual report from Judge LaGrasso.
Pardon me, I got to talk about it. I'll sit back.
No, that's fine.
First of all, let me thank you for allowing me to serve as your judge. It's a job that I enjoy, and I think I probably do a pretty good job at it anyway, from all accounts. For those of you who were not on board the last time I gave a report, I want to congratulate you for being on board now, and thank you for your willingness to serve. For those of you who have been on a while, some of the things I'm going to say tonight you may have heard before, but I think everybody should have a little bit of background of where the court's at, and why it is where it is. I'm going to tell you, most municipal judges do not make an annual report to the Board of Aldermen or their city council. And the result of this is that there is a chasm between the court and the council or the board. And it's not healthy. When I became a judge about 10 years ago, I began the tradition of making this annual report to the board. And Jimmy can tell you, they never heard from a judge before that at any time.
Unless you were called to speak or something.
Yeah, unless you had to show up in court. My hope is that this report will add to your understanding of how the court works and perhaps explain sometimes why the court is doing things that you may not like. And sometimes it's necessary. It also allows me to gain an understanding of the things that are of concern to you and answer any questions you've got. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about what's happened in the past before I share what's gone on this last year and what's coming up in the next year. 4 or 5 years ago, the state legislature imposed new strict regulations on the municipal courts. It reduced the amount of fines that we can collect, in many cases by more than 50%. They eliminated our ability to use jail as an incentive or a punishment in many cases. They dramatically limited the length of time that the police could hold someone before seeing a judge. They limited the percentage of the city's income that could be raised through the court. In the wake of those changes, they did a couple other things too, but in the wake of those changes, the Supreme Court of Missouri got on their high horse and decided it was a perfect time for them to impose even more restrictions. And let me tell you, they did it with a vengeance. They dictated the minimum number of hours that the court must be open. They now determine the fine schedule on most traffic offenses. So when you see the fine schedule, it used to be set by the judges, no more. That's set by the Supreme Court now, and it's stable. It's applied statewide. They mandated that we display signs outside and inside. That's why you see these rights posted. If you notice outside, it says municipal court that's separate from City Hall because they require it. They ordered that case information be available online. And we'll come back and talk about that in a minute. They limited our ability to use police officers as bailiffs. So we had to hire a bailiff, and that's the only time he comes in and works a couple of hours twice a month. He's not a policeman now. Luckily, the police are still there and wonderful to provide security. They mandated that eventually we all go to the same computer software system and that the defendants pay for it through increased court costs, which in some cases lowers the amount of fines that the city actually gets. And I'm going to talk about that again in a minute. They court clerk manage the court bank account instead of the city financial officer. We worked through that in this past year. They mandated in some cases we allow community service instead of imposing fines. And they had increased paperwork and time when allowing people to pay their fines. And also ordered that we pretty much give people time to pay. They limited when the city could have who in the city could have physical access to the court files, which put additional work on the court clerks and the prosecutor. They required the prosecutor to sign all tickets before the court could even put them into the system. We used to put them in, and the prosecutor would come in fortnight and sign the tickets. We can't even start the process now until the prosecutor has signed those tickets. They eliminated the ability of the court clerk to help the prosecutors in any way. It used to be that the court clerks would send out, for example, if the prosecutor needed someone summoned as a witness, the court clerk would send out the summons. They can't do that anymore. The result of that limitation is that we had to hire a part-time clerk for the prosecutor. And it goes on and on, quite frankly. I'm not going to go into all, and those are the sort of the highlights. Separate from all that is an issue that is going to come back at us in a minute regarding the sheriff's retirement fund. An old provision in the law has some language that some argues requires to collect a $3 court cost on every case that is for that sheriff's retirement fund. There are others who don't believe it says that. But at any rate, if it did, there are those of us, and I'm one of them, who believes it's unconstitutional because the sheriff's office does not provide us any service for our court. It has not been decided by the Supreme Court yet. But it's going to be moved before very long, and I'll explain why. First, I'll tell you that we have complied with most of the requirements set forth. There are a couple we haven't, and those are ones that we have a little bit of leeway on timing, and it has to do with the computer system that they're going to make us go to. We have not provided access to case information online. The cost of doing that with the computer system we're on is prohibitive. And under the new computer system that we're going to be forced to go on, that is provided in there. That's why we're holding off. And the only thing I have to certify annually is that we are moving in that direction. So we haven't done that yet. And we've not gone statewide software system yet. We could do that voluntarily right now. There are two reasons that we haven't done that. First, when we go to the statewide system, we have to charge an additional $6 in court costs on every case. In cases that, most traffic cases that get up to the $225 level, court fines and costs, that means it's going to cost the city $6, because we can't charge any more than that, even though they're adding additional costs. So that's going to come right out of the city's pocket. Now, that is not most of the traffic cases. I mean, most of the traffic cases are lower than that anyway. So we can still get it on most of them. When we go to the computer system, in addition to that $6, they will automatically add the $3 sheriff retirement fund fee. So we will, at the snap of a finger, we will go from court costs of $28.50 to $37.50, which to me is pretty high for municipal offenses. Now, the good news about the computer system is that it provides that online access to the courts, or to the public, that they can get on and see what's going on with their case. If any of you have ever gone on a case net, you know what that is, and it's going to be similar to that. It also will automatically generate some reports that the clerks right now are having to do separately, some monthly and annual reports. If all goes according to the current announced plan, we will be on that by next September. And one of the reasons I phrase it like that is not even because of COVID, which may slow it down some, because the training is not as hands-on as it should be. But we were originally scheduled to be on that by the spring of 2019. And they kept delaying it. And some of it is because they haven't got all, they built the system themselves down at the Office of State Courts Administrators. And they haven't got all the bugs worked out yet. It's better though. And they're getting there. But that's the big change that I see coming in the next year for the court, is moving over to that computer system. Now, the good news is we're gonna save a little money on the system we're on now. We've got to figure out how to keep that data without having to continue to pay them for the use of the program on the current system, but we'll figure that out. As for this past year, it's presented some challenges for us. The Supreme Court issued an order back in the spring, and one of the things it said was that the presiding judge of each circuit could determine what level we're supposed to be at. Well, they closed us down for 2 months in the spring, and that was under Supreme Court order, not the presiding judge. And they shut us down completely. We couldn't have any court, anything. Then we could have court, but it was limited to the number of people in the courtroom. And it's set up sort of like this. And I will tell you, we have been able to have court since then, and I take my hat off to the police department. They have done a wonderful job of screening these folks, taking their temperature, getting them signed in, keeping track of how many are in the courtroom so that we're not overloaded. I mean, they've done a wonderful job, and I can't sing their praises enough for the help that they've given us as a court with that. We are now, just this past, the first of the month, we are back to not allowing open court sessions. Now, I'm handling it a little bit differently this time, though, because on any given court night, we have 8 to 12 to 14 attorneys coming in. And so what I did this last Tuesday, we sent out notices to the unrepresented defendants continuing their case. But the attorneys, we asked them to appear still, and we gave them an hour's window to come in so that we can go ahead and deal with those cases. And the prosecutor and I agreed that we would waive their client's appearance if they were ready to resolve the case otherwise. So I just set up in the clerk's office, they work out a deal with the prosecutor if they've got it, and then they bring it to me and I would work with them through the window. So we're still able to conduct some business doing it that way. And we'll see what happens going forward with they loosen that up a little bit. I will tell you, not right at the moment, but under normal times, you are always welcome to attend court and sit and watch what's going on. I welcome it and ask questions about what's going on. I want to share a little story with you, and it's sort of self-serving, but it's fun to know. If you, right outside the door, if you look up above, there's a lady justice. And I'll tell you the story behind that. I was in a second-hand store in Sedalia, Missouri one day, and I saw that thing and absolutely fell in love with it. And it was so much that I negotiated back and forth with them. We haggled for about an hour, and I finally bought it, and I had no clue what I was going to do with it. I mean, I loved the thing, but I didn't have anything. Well, they were in the planning for this building, and so I donated it to the city, and the architects actually came up with that place to put it up there. So that's the story of that anyway. Can I answer? I'd like to answer any questions or hear any concerns that you might have about the court or anything that I haven't covered. All right, don't ever hesitate to, if you've got a concern, to let Joe know or pass it on to me or catch me at court night, because I want to be available to you if you need it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. All right, next up, discussion of Tyler Tech accounting software. I think you saw the note or letter in here from Vicki. And I apologize, 2 weeks ago, I was put in timeout not share with you. But I did want to just point out, and I know we'll give you a thing on fund transfers here in a minute, but I have, for the last 2 years, every month, every 2 weeks, I keep track of what our bank balances are. And while I can't tell you what every penny's spent on, I can at least look at trends. And one of the things that I didn't go back and watch the video last time, so I don't know what was said. But kind of the gist of what came back to me through phone calls and a couple emails was that folks were worried that there was some missing money. I want to tell you there is no missing money. And in fact, if you look at us year over year for 12 months ago, the year ended the month ended 11/30 of 19 versus 11/30 of 2020. We actually are $152,000 ahead of where we were a year ago. And we're over $200,000 ahead of where we were 2 years ago when we were, quote, bankrupt. So we are continuing to accumulate cash. There's not, it's not going up as fast as you'd like maybe. And there are some issues on internal controls and whatnot that I think we need to work on. And I'll discuss that in a few minutes on the intergovernmental piece. But just that I wanted to kind of have that as background. And then Joe, if you want to lead on the.
Okay. What's going on, I'll just give you a real quick basic of how the software works. When we get bills coming into City Hall, our AP clerk inputs them in. And then when she inputs them in to the system and issues out a check to get paid, what that does in the background is it puts it into the due fund, due to portion of the software. And that is like a second check and balance system. So for, let's say, they get a credit card bill, that comes out of general fund at first. And then let's say that it's $100 bill just for eating math, and 25 was from court, 25 was from street, 25 was from water, and 25 was from the police department. When she inputs that into the system to cut the checks out, like I said, it takes that, it says, all right, $25 from court, due from court, goes back to general fund because it's owed for that portion of the bill. And then at the end of the month, when Vicki does all the bank reconciliations, she goes in there and she physically transfers that money, that $25 from court and puts it to the general fund. And she does all these accounting journal entries. And then what that does in the same background is it takes that $25 from the due fund, puts it back down to zero, and the due to puts it back down to zero. And then at the end of the year, when we get ready to close out the program and get ready to start the next fiscal year, those accounts should be zero. Like I said, that's just a check and balance system. So when you get down, all those accounts should be zero. What happened was, Vicki was employed here from, she got hired on 11/2016, and she was terminated on 8/2018. And when she was here the whole entire time, she got the books all straightened out, where it was perfect. And then for some reason, the previous administrator got, let her go. And he went to a temporary service. He didn't have no idea about the Encode or about the government accounting system. Then they hired a bonder, and she was here for, she got hired in August or September of 2018. And she worked here until she resigned March of 2020. During that whole time, she did not understand the concept of the due to due from accounts. So she was not even doing it. And so what this is like, so Vicki came back in. When Vonnie resigned, I contacted Vicki, got her back in because she's the one that got it all straightened out. And she's an expert in Encode and everything. She's a CPA. In order to get this book straightened out right now, we got to go back all the way back to 2017 and do all the journal entries, adjustments, and to get everything squared back to zero. And she needs Tyler Tech's help. They estimated it's going to take about 32 hours to do it, and it's going to be around $5,400 to get it done.
Is Vicki full-time now?
She is
Or at least
contract
here
labor.
enough
She's a
time,
contract labor right now.
Or at least long enough to
Yeah.
keep
She
the
comes
arrow
in.
going straight.
She comes in Monday through Fridays. She gets here about 7:30, 7:45, and she leaves around 1 or 2. Like I said, she's a contract labor, so she makes her own schedules for that hour. But she's in her every week.
But she's the horse is pulling the cart now.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the downside to the zeroing out versus giving away?
But when we do our audits and all the reports are in the systems, it just gets them square back up.
Yeah, because I'm kind of like you, and I've spent probably 7 hours the last couple of days working on this, and it's just tedious going through line by line, each canceled check, trying to figure out, because the revenue side is real easy. The bank totals it for you, you can plug it in. But if you think about your checkbook, the bank will tell you how many checks you wrote. But now you gotta go in there, if you wanna know all of them that you wrote to the light company or something, you gotta go through there and pull each one of those out. And because I was doing it to try and look at these inter-fund transfers, again, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes, but I thought I had a real easy, we'll just plug these in here. Well, yeah, it will be easy once you get on top of it, but catching it up, it's like I say, I spent about 7 hours, and I didn't even get a month done. So if he can do all that in 32 hours, then I would say that's probably
But
pretty
he'd be working
valuable.
with Vicky, he'd be working together, I mean, all the people that work for CPA experts and experts in the software itself too. So he'd be calling and we'd be going and working together, get the work straight back. And they, like I said, they asked about 32 hours.
And are we, I guess, 100% sure that the numbers you're looking at here, these are correct?
I take these right off the bank.
Because she says right here, right, that any financial reports being printed from Inco, right, there's gonna be discrepancy.
I go up to Central Bank, because I use their,
So that is-
they send, Joe sends me the bank statements, and then I also get that daily snapshot that shows what the balance of accounts is. That's what I use on the in-between, so I've got a November 30th, which was the actual bank statement, and I have a December 2nd, which was that daily snapshot, and
Real funds.
yeah, exactly, from Central Bank.
And that's a good point. We operate in a modified cash-based system, which means every one of our major accounts, water, sewer, streets, general fund, court, they all got their own separate bank account in the bank itself.
I guess then the second part of that is, how come it wasn't caught for so long? And how are we gonna prevent this in the future?
I have a theory. I developed what I'm calling a manager's dashboard that I developed that I'd like Joe to complete, and it has the water, sewer, general, the big funds, the ones that tend to have a lot of cash, for lack of a better term, sloshing back and forth. I want us to be able to follow that on every 2-week period. He would present this at each meeting, we would each get a copy of this. And then if you look at where the net revenue on the calendar year, that should tie out to the bank statement every time. So you'll have both a fiscal year and a calendar year number, so you'll know where we're at with relative to the budget, but also know where we're at. So if like you said, hey, I want to see the central bank statement, that when you looked at the total cash on hand, that should also tie out.
Okay.
That was the best I could come up with. There might be a better mechanism, but that's what I did.
Because again, what if Vicky needs again or something happens and now we're in the same range?
But the problem is, like I said, when they hired Donna, not put it down at all. I mean, she was not an expert in government accounting, the Gatsby before, and she was not an expert in code. And instead of asking for help, we got everybody that has code on the computer's got an 800 number you can call anytime, and the expert will help you out with any problem. She would never call me. And so, I mean, I asked Vicky, I said, Vicky, like, what can we do to control this again? And she's like, really, you just got to trust who you got in this department. She says, because I did, when Vicky, like I said, Donna said when I already got here, took my position. But starting in August until December, when she left on sick leave, I was in the office once a week. So where we at with, are we ready for the audit? It's been reconciled. She kept on saying, yes, it's been done, it's done, it's done, it's done. So, I just took her word for it.
I do think there might be value down the road, once we're sure exactly budget-wise, of having even like a quarterly checkup done by an outside party, whether it's Tyler Technologies or whomever, just to validate the instrument and make sure that what we're doing is working the way
Especially
we
the
intended.
first year,
Yeah,
to make sure.
yeah, exactly, because you don't know, you won't know what you don't know.
And we don't want to wait a year and a half, 2 years
Yeah.
down the road to try to.
And then to find out, if we found out that, the worst case would be we're looking at this and like, oh crap, there is money missing. Again, like I say, when I look at that, I mean, I was able to, once I started filling in the boxes, it got pretty obvious to me that there's nothing missing. It was just it's in the wrong bucket. And so that's a piece that we really, I can't stress enough, I think the board, I'd like a resolution, and I'll get to that in a minute, but to make it clear there is no ambiguity, that we're gonna put this money in the buckets they belong in as soon as we get our hands on the money. And that we are tracking this because there is ordinances that say how we will move this money between accounts. And clearly, at this point, we are not compliant with our ordinance, in my opinion. And we have got to get that reconciled, because that's creating all that noise in the community, because I can see if you're looking, I'm giving you $5 and then having you turn around and hand me $5, and I'm handing you $5 back in. Whose $5 was it to begin with? And there's nothing, we're not doing anything wrong, but our processes are terrible.
And
you've
it's
got to
coming
get
off
that
of,
fixed.
not too long ago, we got the letter about the 1.3 million and those issues, and then
Right.
we thought we fixed it because we credited our separate accounts, and then now here we're back with the same, so we gotta stop this process and do it right.
Exactly, that's what I would have. So I think having Tyler do this is a dispassionate third party that isn't, well, barrel in Joe's pocket or vice versa. This takes any question about how the data is being done, being analyzed and pulled together, and for $5,400, I think that would be, again, to show faith with the community. I hate the fact that we're spending $5,000, but, you know, if it puts everybody's mind at ease that the money that we're spending or have spent has been done without any funny business going on, I think it's money.
Oh,
well
yeah,
spent.
no choice.
Yeah, I mean, well, you always have a choice, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I think we have a bad choice and a less unattractive choice.
Why Tyler Peck, just out of curiosity, is this somebody that Vicky's worked with in the
That's
past?
That's our current software company.
Okay, I got you. I thought, I was under the assumption we were gonna switch softwares and all that stuff, so there's no switching software.
Text is our current.
They're a current provider, they just,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
So if there were no questions, I'd take a motion to approve.
Very quick question. Do we have something in writing that says, well, how much was it for?
$5,400.
Do we have something that writes says $5,400, whether we did 36 hours or we got into it and realized it was gonna take us 96 hours?
No, that was a company that they just, they gave us like email, it's gonna say it's gonna take, they say roughly 32 hours, and at the cost of $5,400.
Could we get like a not to exceed number? And
No, we can, amend it, and I can get back and say, hey, we'll pass it with a not to exceed number of, we'll do it. Like, they estimate it's gonna take 32 hours, so. So we're gonna make motion, like I said, not to exceed a certain amount.
Move to approve the 5,400 Tyler Tech.
I'd like to add on, before we approve, to do that, to not to exceed the 5,400. I don't know if we need a motion for that or not. It's in there.
You got it. It's there.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so your second?
Yes.
Okay. Got a motion and a second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next up, discussion on a burning ordinance.
I think this is me.
Okay.
If it's okay.
Sure, please.
I understand from the last meeting that you wanted to have me prepare an ordinance on burning, and I can do that. I just need more instruction on what is it exactly we're trying to address. And I'll give you, when you plow through it all, there's 3 things to consider. I'm assuming that burning trash, I mean, that's a thing. People, rather than pay to have the waste disposal company come out, they want to burn it. I'm assuming we're going to prohibit that. We don't want people burning their garbage. Okay, that one's easy. There is leaves, grass clippings, things like that. Do we want to allow that? Are we going to let somebody burn their leaves, or do we want to prohibit that? I need to know, because there are various cities do different things. And I just didn't know, do you want to prohibit it? Do you want to limit it? Do you want to allow it at any time? I just need to have an understanding. If I cut down a tree in my backyard and I've got all the limbs, can I go ahead and burn them up?
I'd like to say yes, that
That's right.
within reach,
To
during
a-
daylight hours with winds less than 15 mile an hour or something like that.
Yeah, and the size of the log or whatever probably needs to be.
We do have a
Fire.
brush drop off that we allow for certain.
Yeah, I think the challenge, and maybe my neighborhood is the only one that has this, but those of us who have, I got a 3-acre yard and a bunch of brush in the back that I'm cleaning up every time we get a good wind, or ice storm, it's just real easy for me to drag it all over a pile and burn it than it is to load it up
Same
and haul
thing
it
in our
out.
area, because on the mature trees,
Mhm.
and I rake 2 or 3 times, and I mulch 2 or 3 times, and my neighbors haven't done it, so I'm still fighting the battle. If you burn them once or twice, then you're done.
Exactly.
I kinda like, the Oak Grove, where they allow you like a few weeks in the spring, a few weeks in the fall, but have it only during daylight hours, 10 to 2 or 10 to 4, whatever, that type of thing. I think would be okay if we want. But granted, there's, like your area,
In the summer,
where you have-
people are on a cookout, or neighbors over, or whatever.
where you have acreage and you got a little more room, those same rules are gonna apply to anybody that's a lot tighter and a lot more, so they can have the same. So we gotta be mindful of that.
And just as a guy who's been burning for darn near 30 years, actually earlier in the day, the winds are calmer, so it's usually better to get out there at sunrise and get it ready to start burning.
You come on over sunlight. I'm ready to go.
And if we limit to these 2 weeks or whatever, and say the spring, you're also fighting Mother Nature. Well, it rained those 2 weeks.
Well, they have
There's
five-
a high chance to burn.
I guess they have a 5-week window, so we could do something like that, like a month.
When the trees start to turn and fall, that's where we gotta take it.
Yeah, that's-
And
yeah,
for a
exactly.
length of time.
I usually like late February when you have that last snow and the ground is still wet, but everything
yeah.
is dry, so you can burn it and it doesn't spread.
And per the fire protection districts thing, we're out of their window right now currently for the orange, yellow, red skycast that you're prohibited from burning during those times. It's like April to August, September, something like that.
Yeah, that's in the DNR regs.
There is.
But I mean, if we go with what DNR says and what First Aid Fire Protection District says, and if I'm not mistaken, our own ordinance say we can burn leaves and stuff now. So I don't think we need to change that.
So there isn't any state law that says we can't do that, right?
No more oil.
Well, yeah, as far as trash,
Yeah, the hazardous waste stuff you
as
can't.
far as leaves and brush and stuff like that,
Is our,
you're not gonna get a no vote from me. I'm okay with burning it, especially.
is our current ordinance burning's prohibited?
No,
Is this old, or is this, because I have section 215 spot 040 that says it's prohibited unless you get a permit.
but the permit no longer exists.
You can't get on it,
Right,
so.
which means then no burning.
Well, then you gotta think about just getting up to reg, looking at it and saying, okay, they're no longer requiring permits, so maybe we should bring it up for discussion and allow people to burn some leaves in their backyard. I mean, yeah, I agree with what the mayor said. You know, I got 3 kids at the house, it's just easy, I can take 5 gallons of grow in the backyard, throw the leaves in there, done.
Like I said, I'm okay with on certain windows, to allow that,
Why are you in certain windows? Just out of curiosity.
just for safety. I mean, I think it's a safety
So
issue.
you think it's gonna be safer in August than it is in December to burn?
It's less safe in August, I guess.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. You think it's gonna be safer one period of time?
And you just don't want wild west burning. I mean, there's a reason why Green Valley, Oak Grove have more restrictions,
Mhm.
right? There's a reason over there.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I was curious about the,
Not everybody has acreage or space
Right.
or is careful,
right.
right? A lot of people start drinking and burn stuff down.
What? That leads to the third, as I said, there were 3, so I got trash, I got brush, and the third is, as I understood it, this all came about because of what I would call a recreational fire. Somebody has a fire pit in their backyard, they have a chimney, they have a fire bowl, they have an outdoor fireplace. Are we trying to prohibit and limit those things? So if I've got a chimney in my backyard or a real fancy outdoor fire pit, I can have that. And we're not trying to put any sort of limits on those things. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
You do as long as you move here.
Okay.
Or even, or in my opinion, even if it's a fire pit in the ground, it doesn't have to be anything fancy,
Sure,
just
I
something that
understand.
prohibits the spread of the fire.
But it's not, it's different between typically when you talk about burning,
Right.
it is intended to be, I'm trying to dispose of something. I'm trying to burn my trash, I'm trying to burn my brush,
Right.
as compared to, I'm having a recreational fire.
Correct.
Well,
But
And that would be my question, is differentiating burning my trash from a recreational fire.
Right.
I mean, because you're probably gonna be burning your recreational fire in the evening when it's dark, because it's cool. How you would know whether I'm burning
fire is also disposing of limbs that fall. So
Well,
it works both ways.
I understand that. I guess typically the burning of brush, it's a much bigger fire, and it requires that more focused attention, and it has the potential danger to spread and things like that. If you're talking about a small controlled fire in your backyard, that's, usually a different thing, but I wasn't sure what you wanted to address. And so I understand that that's not part of what you're trying to do. I can come back for you next month, and I'll have a sample ordinance, and I'll give you a couple of alternatives. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet.
All right, next up, discussion and approval of intergovernmental funds transfer agreement, although this is Presner. Yes, it's something just like that. If you look back here on, behind the burning stuff, we had a situation, and again, I apologize to Joe if this sounds unduly harsh, but we have been since March or April, I think, we've had that Fund 20 bank account set up. And if you remember back in June, we breezed into this and actually was thinking about sending extra money because we had accumulated some extra in there. And so we made our quote house payment, building payment in June. Everything was hunky-dory. Now, I got an email from Joe Monday, I think it was, maybe it was Friday. And it's like, I need you to approve these funds transfers because we don't have enough money to make the building payment. And I was kind of, for purposes of our viewers at home, friendly voice, doggone it, Joe, how did this come to be? And it was not that we didn't have the money, it was that the money was not getting put into Fund 20 and was being left in the general fund. Now, the reason that Vicki tells me is because when the state gives us the money, they won't deposit into these other accounts, they put it into that master account. But that does not, in my mind, relieve us of the obligation to then in turn move that money to the account where it belongs. When I looked at just for November, if you looked at just cash flow, and that was what Vicki kept telling me, was, Daryl, you gotta understand cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Well, when you put everything through one account, hell yeah, you've got a lot of money running through that account because you just keep writing every check on that account. We ran $163,000 through the general fund in November. But out of that was ultimately was the $30,000 that we transferred into the Fund 20 building fund. So we got it back where it is. But the problem is that going forward, we shouldn't be, this looks to me like you're washing money all the time. It's like, why were we frantic moving money to try and make our building payment? We should be getting about $10,000, $11,000 a month in tax revenue that goes into that Fund 20 every month. So that one's there. The other is by ordinance, we're allowed to take like 7.5% out of the gross revenues of the water sewer fund, which is a shade over $60,000 a year. But we took $77,000 out of the water sewer fund in the last 30 days, according to the central bank transfer law. So we've already pissed away all the money we had to move out of water sewer to the general fund for the rest of the year. So we've got, in my mind, I know it's not that money was being used improperly, but when we wrote the budget, we said that we would have salaries for public works come out of streets and water sewer. Yeah, and prorated on what the allocation of hours per department was. And instead what we're doing is we're taking all that money out of the general fund. And I know if you look at it, it kind of looks the same, but in my mind, by the rules of accounting, is if that money is in the water sewer bucket, you don't just give it to the general fund to do whatever. If it's for salaries, the water sewer's writing checks to the public works guys, then their payroll should come out of that fund. And because of that, we moved, like I say, the $77,900 came out of water sewer. We've had, despite that, water sewer still has as of the close of business December 2nd, we still got $110,000 in that account. But if you go back just a few months into right before Halloween, we had $172,000 in that account. So when you think about what our biggest risk as a community, if you ask me, is around that sewer plant failing, bad sewer lines that we have had detailed over here on Potterton Lane and other places, and then our water lines, because we've got those leaking and that's costing us money going to Independence if we don't get those fixed. So accumulating cash in that water sewer fund is actually where we need to be putting our investment, because that's where we're getting all of our expense. And so when it's kind of subsidizing everything else, that's gonna create a problem. Now, the good news is, and I thank the citizens for the tax for the general fund, and that should address part of this, fixing the salary fee. But the other thing is the internal controls. We've gotta make sure that we're taking the money, and when we get the money, putting it into the right account. And not only that, then we're writing it out, that we're writing it out of the proper account. And so, again, I will get you all, I'm gonna need to clean this up a little bit more. But I will make sure before the next meeting that all of you get a copy of this, what I'm calling dashboard report for the city manager. And that should allow us all to be able to follow the money, where it is, how much we got coming in, how much we got going out. And then on the what's going out, it's more how much of it's salaries and benefits, and then how much of it's just everything else, because I'd like it to be a one-pager. And then, like I say, when you look at the totals, the calendar year one will tie out against the bank statement. So if you ever said, hey, Darrell, or Joe, or whoever, I want to see the bank statements, you can just lay it down there and that column should tie. So, in addition to that, there's also some questions, because I've had, and I know it's somewhat unrelated, but I'm going to just, since I'm talking about the form, I've had some questions from citizens and some of the council as well about things that were getting done, or how would we know. And I think we may have something on here. I apologize for knowing. Yeah, the IT service. We had a question about the cameras. This would have like a column, so we just know how many cameras are up at any given point in time. So we can kind of start tracking downtime. So if we know that we've only got 6 of 9 cameras up at City Hall or something, we can be saying, Joe, why do we only have 6 of 9 working, or what have you? So we can get that. And I just had that for wastewater, park, and City Hall. Then also tracking our loss ratio on the water, because that again ties back to where are we. Independents, we're writing a check for every drop that runs out on the ground. So the only way we fix that is by capturing the revenue side of it. And then also just tracking citizens' concerns, public works projects, and the water meter issue, making sure that we're tracking all the water meters and how many of those are up, and hopefully we have 100% in service and what have you. So, all that being said, I apologize for getting long-winded on that, but I do feel very strongly that first that we approve the transfers just because we have to pay the bills. But going forward, we've got to, I'd ask, and it'll probably be 2 separate motions. One would be to pass the transfer, and then the other would be to just if nothing else, a resolution reinforcing that the board supports the mayor's position that these funds be allocated according to the budget and as indicated by ordinance. I don't know that we even need that, but I just want somebody besides me standing here saying, look, doggone it, this money is allocated to this fund. Let's get the money in that fund.
Well, as a member of the finance board, you have my support on that, absolutely. I mean, we're the custodians of the citizens' money and the city's money, and we need to show that we're doing the right thing. I mean, we just had the sales tax passed, and then something like this happens, and we look like idiots. We don't need that. And if I can back way up, if I recall Steve sitting right here during a meeting saying, what you can't do is what we just did. Why? The process is bad. If the person who's doing this not knowledgeable enough to know, when the state gives us our money and they say, here it is, now you put it in the right buckets, why didn't it get moved where it belonged?
And that's a question I can't answer.
If that's the problem. I mean, who's responsible for that, Joe?
Figure doesn't change when we come in.
So do you have confidence that we can get her on the right
Yeah,
path?
after we talked to the mayor on the phone,
Do you know why she didn't do it in the first place?
well, like I said, when it all comes into the fund, she was transferring when they had the money, but then when the general fund started getting so tight, we had to pay bills. You know, like one time we had like $8,000 and we had $12,000 worth of bills. And you took that 10,000 out, that was like 2,000 in the general fund. $12,000 worth of bills.
But I think the thing that I would like the folks at this board and anybody watching at home is we have those situations that they that kind of puts it in front of everybody. Otherwise, you know, the trains just keep running and they don't know what magic you did behind the scenes to make it happen. And then when something happens, it's like, you're a bomb. And so keep the issue in front of folks so that they know, you know, like, how did we get down to $8,000? And folks, we only have $8,000, so we're only gonna be able to do.
So that's the part
X.
that befuddles me, we should be solvent, and suddenly we're not, we're having to borrow money.
Well, we are, but part of it, I think the other piece is, we're not pulling, what's really happening is, they're paying public works out of the general fund and then taking the money out of the other and using it to pay back. That's
So
simply what
we're
it was.
from back to the other bucket.
What's going on is general fund pays for everybody's payroll, and then when once payroll's done, Vicky goes back and transfer everybody's portion, so like like public works portion goes back into the general fund, whether they pay payroll, courts go back into general fund, whatever gets paid payroll, but we only get one account for payroll that comes out of the general fund. And then after each payroll, she transfers back from the other departments back into the general fund.
Now, my question is the ambiguity that then creates, because if you're only allowed to take 7.5% out of water sewer, to transfer to the general fund, because that's what it says right there on that budget sheet when you do the budget each year, it doesn't say except for reimbursed payroll. So that's my question, is if you're not taking the payroll out of the account that it's charged with, you've just blown all your transfer, you know, because I take some of that to be overhead, you know, for the public works piece of this building, the light bill, and all the other stuff that's getting paid out of
And
that.
that gets transferred back into the general fund too.
Right, exactly, but I mean,
But we're
But that's-
passing the percentage number, then working backwards.
yeah, exactly, that, when you do that, you're almost double dipping.
Like I said, the payroll account is set to come out of the general fund. so-
Is there a way to change that to where every department has their own payroll account?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what, could we, I don't know, if we use ADP or whoever we use, or, I mean, it should just be which account
Because
we're
that would
drawing
seem to
on.
be, that would solve that problem right away.
Yeah, it would seem.
Well, it would only to the extent that you have, each employee's only gonna get paid from the one account.
Right.
What you've got though is you've got employees where their time is split amongst a couple of different accounts. So if you have a situation where like Joe, he probably spread out over 4 accounts.
Right.
So you get 4, if you did that, you get 4 paychecks.
How many employees do we have that are spread over different?
A lot of them, Casey spread out between water, sewer, and administration. And then Vicky is spread out to all four departments, I'm spread out to all 4 departments.
The police is, and the police don't get spread, but they're all in the general fund.
Yeah, they're
It's
right.
the one that hammers it.
So it doesn't sound
Are
like.
we the only municipality that handles it this way?
No.
How can we keep screwing it up then?
Huh?
How can we keep screwing it up if everybody else is
But
doing
not
it?
sure, I mean, like I said, it all comes out of general fund, and then she transfers back after each pay period, she transfers all the taxes that come out of that portion, all the salaries, you know, stuff like health insurance, FICA, that all gets transferred back into the general fund, and once the pay period is set.
Mr. Mauer, I got a question. Is, just from a standpoint of literal versus intent, because my thought would have been, when they passed that ordinance originally to take a piece of water sewer, was that to subsidize the salary piece, or was that purely an overhead cleanup?
Just the overhead. That 7.5% was for other costs, not salary.
Okay, so then we need to have a clean journal entry or something showing what total payroll is, and then doing that transfer back.
And that's what Vicky gets it, when I get done to the payroll, it comes out a 33-page report, it tells what money goes back to what, back to the general fund. There's that due fund, that's where that goes back into the general fund.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you fill this in, then, because I'll have to go back now and look and see how that $77,000.
Yeah,
I don't know how much of that was payroll and how much.
And
of
we
that
can
was
tell you how
something
much
else.
went each one, just like I can tell you, Becky just brought me the numbers this morning, in fact, talk about that, and water loss, all that. Water sales were up $20,000 from last month. And a lot of it's due to water leak, and a lot of it's due to repairs, replacing the meters of that. And it's gonna keep on going, because I was gonna do this on the report, but, We had 66 meals, not looking, we got down to 37, and they hope they finish it up by next week and get the rest of the bill.
So we're halfway there, okay,
Yeah.
good deal. Now, haven't done it in another week?
Yeah, I don't take long once I get it going.
But because I thought they'd
Water
only give us so
sales-
many and then.
Water sales, sober, as you say, it was up $20,000 from last.
Yeah, so, yeah, I had costed of water for November at $35,000. I don't know, the problem was I had not previously been tracking it, so I don't know how that ties to the.
So my question is, and you, I guess, Mr. Mauer, is, do we need to change our ordinance since we're paying extra employees in different buckets? Do we need to change our rules that say that 7.5% is for everything except payroll?
I think as long as we understand that it's an overhead expense,
I
then.
don't think we need to change.
But I think the bigger thing is from an accounting standpoint is we gotta make sure we got a good journal entry to show where the payroll money is moving back, because what I'm usually working off of is the bank statement. And you'll see it's like CB something, and then there's an account number that ends in like 258, I learned is the one for the general fund. And you'll just see that it'll show a transferred out or transferred in. And so getting some kind of documentation, and to a certain extent this can do this with a couple of lines being added to it, would show that that money was being transferred back to the general fund or back to the streets fund or whatever. Because I guess what makes sense would be to have because the money's all landing in the general fund first, right?
Yeah.
So it's not getting, but once it gets out to the street fund or the water fund, well, that's another question too, yeah, because the street fund didn't have an allocation tied to it that I could find going through the budget.
Oh, yeah, as far as,
So we really shouldn't be transferring anything other than whatever the prorated piece of the salary for the streets.
yeah. And
So
that's
public works is gonna primarily hit streets
I
and
think-
and water sewer.
I think Wilson, Margaret, and Mason, their split is like 45 water, 45 sewer, and like 5% streets. That's what but yeah. And like I said, when we do the payroll info, which is our software, it prints out a 38-page report and it tells us how much money to put back in the general fund for salaries, how much to put back for medical insurance, how much to put back for everything. And it gives percentage, it gives the line item, and it puts out 2 other different reports. And when I do payroll, I get it all, that. She keeps a file on it, so there's a file in the office, it's got to go back to.
But well, I think the good thing with that would be is because then it sounds like, because where I was working off of the bank statements,
Yeah.
where I'm gonna pull it, that should all come out of Encode, but that would then create a good check document against, if you use this against the Encode
Yeah.
piece, you'll have what the bank says to check it against, so we should then be monthly reconciling, we should be reconciling that every 30 days.
Yeah,
To make sure that the bank statement matches what the computer thinks we've got.
So we don't have to worry about moving this money back and forth and that 7.5% from every department becoming an issue.
I don't think so, as long as we understand that it's a one-time overhead transfer and not, because that's the other thing, like when I was looking at the parks transferred $7,700 out of their capital fund into their operations fund. And when I was looking at that, the question I had was because they had like $38,000 in revenue, and since it was 10%, it looked to me like the ordinance at 10% of the revenue.
Yeah.
It would have been what the new money was, you wouldn't keep taking that out of the savings
No,
account.
what we and people decide to do, and that may be some guidance we need too, is, because after we pass that, I want to say we take
10%.
2%. And it's dated yearly, so what she did is for that 77, she went back to last year's money, and took 10% of that. And then we won't do that again until the November of next year, again.
Okay, because that was another thing, is I just having a way
Because we was trying to figure out how to do it monthly, because it's ordinance states yearly. And then, so we just started at the end of each fiscal year, we'll transfer that money from capital fund into the park operation fund.
Right, and I think there's another reason for putting it on that worksheet is just so everybody remembers, we've already moved that money, and
Yeah.
how much we moved, because for me, every time you give me one of these calls or emails, hell, I don't remember which one we've already done or didn't do, and I'm usually not sitting in front of, well, I'm usually in front of a computer, but not the right one that has this information in it, so, okay, so, again, again, I apologize for kind of my digression on that, but I think that it needs to be discussed. But is there any other questions, or?
I have a question
Yes.
on the actual document, the agreement, which to my knowledge, these are new, right? We just came up with these?
No.
Or
We've
maybe
been,
these
yeah,
all-
a couple of years.
Okay. I was just curious why the park board is at the bottom.
It's typo, I'm sure.
Because it's on both, that it's noted by the park board for an
Oh, yeah,
extension.
yeah.
I wasn't sure what they had to do with the.
There should be street.
These are templates, I didn't, yeah,
Okay.
I'll get that corrected.
Anything good?
No, it's a good eye.
Good catch, yeah.
I mean, maybe they want to be involved.
I was wondering the same thing. Thank
Everyone wants to come to the party.
I read it, but I skipped right over.
Yeah, these are templates that, in the past, I just, I'll get catch that.
Where do you see that?
Good.
Just above the greens and you read
that last time.
Up there, by the park, that is, park board. It's a water sewer, that one, it's a street on it. That's what you're saying. So, can I get a motion to approve my signature being applied to those two documents?
Someone,
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Discussion on IT services, IT9 solutions. Jim?
Yeah, after the last meeting, I guess we had, so I wasn't here till I was in sub-14, but, it was a discussion about IT9 contract and services, and so I just, put back on, because I know all of us have to put back on there.
Yeah, so mine was basically in regards to the cameras, not so much the service that he provides, the company provides for the city itself. My number one concern is, and after discussing it with Park Board, the amount of time that it took, the fact that we paid it prior to the job being complete,
We didn't pay prior to the job.
that's not what the statements are saying.
Well, that was, is that we paid the first payment on November 22nd, 2019, for $3,878.19. That was toward the contract, and we had to pay it for the equipment up front. And then once the job was completed,
When did he say the job was completed? Because there for a while, it wasn't completed for,
well, it was completed, all the cameras were put in December 22nd, no, I'm sorry, December 14th. We paid the last $4,000 after, I went out there, I saw cameras put in, I didn't know that it was working properly. Once we paid that, that's when we started having problems, and she, the couple approached me and said, hey, these cameras, they're too low, they're supposed to be up higher, so we was working out with them, and he came back and fixed all those.
that's just my concern, is just the fact we didn't really, make sure, if we're paying this money, we need to make sure the job's done correctly per the contract. I mean, that's just kind of, that's where I'm coming from, is if the cameras aren't working, regardless if it's at wastewater or the park, if they're not working, we're just pissing money away at that point. So that was my number one concern, was the fact that the money was paid and the job still wasn't completed per contract. And then there were so many issues with getting the company back out to fix the problem. So that was the number one concern I had, that we paid and it wasn't fully done per the contract. And there were some little things in the contract, the type of camera that it was and all that was error.
Yeah, he just had,
Yeah, I read the email,
The
yeah.
thing that we didn't address in our email, and I don't fault you because you weren't here, was that, we could never seem to get in touch with this individual.
Right,
He wouldn't return calls or
Exactly.
emails.
yep. Yeah, there's no
he
lack
always
of,
returned my calls and choose calls, I don't know.
there's just lack of communication between,
So this is probably a stupid question. Do the last of things work now?
Huh?
Do they work now?
The cameras?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
There's
talked to
one down that's been down for 2 weeks, and he had promised us 2 cameras, back in July for all the trouble and how long it took. It took like 6 months or more to get them up. So he promised us 2 extra cameras. He still hasn't put in the last one, but
plans on, he's quarantined to December 7th. And he's planning on being here midweek next week to finish up the rest of City Hall and hopefully get that camera going and go through.
Was there also a router issue?
Yeah, that was my next question, was, did he take a router from up here, was there a router
No, he took
removed
right up
from down there and put up here?
Yeah,
Why?
because the route up here broke down and nobody had computer service up here, including the doors up front of it, so.
Is that one of the problems that we were working on with, when we did when we approved the new work to be done in the IT room, is that something we
No,
addressed?
that was
We had addressed the router.
That was just a backup battery.
That was solely backup batteries.
Yeah.
Okay.
The router, the one thing that came to City Hall, that's when I was quarantined, and none of the computers would connect to the internet, and just panicked, they called me, I called him, he came out, and the quick fix was to run down there to the fleet. Now, the cameras at the race department are still working, he rerouted them to the modem from CenturyLink to keep them going, but then he took the router that was down there and put it up here in City Hall, so that City Hall can get running that day.
So we didn't lose any service in the cameras then?
Huh?
We didn't lose any camera service?
No.
So but is the router situation resolved then?
No, not yet, they got COVID.
Oh.
And that's one of the things I'm gonna get back on.
Okay.
I have a question on the cameras. Is there audio on those cameras?
Yes, there is.
We didn't approve that as a board. Did we have to approve audio? You don't know why?
We got signs up.
I'm just not in
We got
favor.
signs that says the audio.
I'm just not in favor of that. I'm not in favor of it on intersections either. I'm just not in favor of that kind of privacy being taken away. Not the fact that it doesn't help that, help you get other people, but I'd rather not that privacy being taken away over that. So, I mean, that's my issue.
Of course, I think that counts out of the point.
It is, but can it be put back in?
For a price.
I like to keep the audio on myself.
But nobody knew about the audio. It wasn't ever brought up, just the cameras.
Is
I
that
was
true of the
here.
ones in the park as well?
Huh?
Is that true of the ones in the park as
Yeah,
well?
they got audio.
So at least if they're saying, hey, Joe, grab that camera and let's go,
Yeah.
the last thing we have is a name, somebody.
And that happened too.
But what about the people that are just there having a good time during the day?
There's signs posted.
Well, I think the only people that have access is Sutherland and myself. And it's not something that you just get on and start watching and listening to.
Oh, we can put it on our website.
No, it's usually when somebody would call in and say something happened. But I think we're the only two that have access, so.
Well, I hear you. I'm just, I'm old school about freedom.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah.
I think the one thing I take away from this is this system's what, a year old?
Mhm.
And we've had nothing but problems?
Mhm.
It just seems that for something that's only a year old, router's breaking and the camera's not
The
working.
router never says City Hall, that has nothing to do with cameras.
He just yanked the router to City Hall, to get City Hall back on board, he just took the router.
Down there.
Yeah, and just got City Hall going.
So he's our contractor for City Hall.
Yes.
It's our IT
Yes,
system.
yeah, these are IT guys for City Hall.
How long is that contract for?
It's annually, it's due up in, well, it's announced, it's due up next September, but we got a clause that we can get out at any time, we can give him notice.
I'd like to look around, I mean.
Well, we did look around before we got this guy, and nobody, we put ads out and advertised it, and nobody responded.
Can we do it again?
Because I tell you, you tell me from Buckner, it's like at the edge of the world, nobody wants to come out this far. We had, the other time we had Chad before that, and he was from North Dakota. We really got him there.
Yeah, the challenge we had with the last guy was we had a whole closet of stuff that was hooked up.
Yeah.
It was all plugged in and lit up, but it didn't go to anything.
I mean,
That was nice.
when everything's good, now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I mean, there's times that, I can think of at least 6 times, just off the top of my head, they did show up and call me late, say, hey, you made an excuse, hey, my kid's sick, I'm sick. There've been 2 car accidents. I mean,
His dog's died 4 times.
I think, well, actually, this is actually,
I don't know if we should get more dogs at least, that many times.
I mean, I feel like the email is a lot of contradictions. Because he's like, well, I did this, but there was this problem, well, this was this, but there was the, I mean, nothing's perfect, and nobody's perfect, and the systems break, and that's all understandable. Is this the best service for our buck, is the real question.
I would like to kind of get a feel for what's out there.
I
Like,
think the last bid was quite a bit higher than that one
The
too.
last guy went 60 to 80,000. Coming up.
just to see what's out there. I mean, not,
Yeah,
not the IT guy.
I agree, asking the question, straight.
Yeah.
Ask the question. Anything else around the IT service? Discussion on South Hudson Road, discussion options for road repairs. I know we had an ongoing conversation.
What I do, I probably got done, like earlier this week, me and public crew went out there and we walked the whole entire Hudson from Lake City all the way up to the top to the dead end. And we found 6 really major spots that needed to be repaired. I mean, there was some that had cracking and little potholes, but these were the ones with the deep holes and stuff like that. So I went back and did some calculation on my own, and I come to a rough figure of about 15,000 to fix it. And that's doing it in-house, but granted, that's gonna take Public Works, there's only 3 guys at Public Works, about 2 weeks to get it done. And we had to do it half at a time because that road is so narrow. I think it's only 12 foot wide, 14 foot wide, so. That was with an excavator, because I bought that, dig up that. It's with an excavator for 2 weeks, that's with rock hammer for the Bobcat for 2 weeks, and then it's 53 yards of concrete, and it's $125 a yard for concrete, and you got short loads of another $110. So that's not too many, anyway, but I came to about 15,000.
I know you had mentioned at one time there was an issue around the sub-base
Yeah.
and any number of
And that don't
things.
include the kind of sub-base problem that we may get to. So just for a second opinion, I met with a contractor out of Sibley today, and we walked the same thing, and he looked at the same areas, and he's gonna put us a bid too, hopefully by next week. And I told him, he was concerned about sub-base too, because hey, we can get in here and dig it down to 8 inches like we want, put it back up concrete, but if we hit a bad sub-base, you might have to dig it down deeper and put more base rock in and stabilize it, and then get it back up. So I said, well, include that into your, proposal. And I told him flat out, when we came out, so, I just want to estimate, because I said, if we decide to go a different route, we would have to go out to bid, go through the whole bidding process.
Now, is this something that down the road, so to speak, if we get the rest, I mean, I love the idea of the concrete, I know that we do asphalt most everywhere around here mainly because I think it's fast and easy and expensive. When we get, are we gonna look at finishing that road, will we have to tear that out, or can we
Well,
pull over it, or?
that's the point. The 6 spots that we got are the worst one with the sub-base failures, so if we, my thoughts are, if we can get those dug out, get them stabilized, bring them back up to, all the way to street level with concrete, 8 inches thick, then when we do get the money to actually redo that road, at least those spots will have a good base to them, then you just mill and overlay the rest. But the big problem is when you crews together, we need crews to go that road and 2 stone big boxes on each end.
Are these the worst in Buckley? Okay. Well, I'm
East
kind of a little bit,
East Jefferson.
kind of a little bit worried about that, putting our money on the worst, but,
Oh, this is one of those,
yeah.
but East Jefferson's just as bad.
I know, when we get it, eventually, one
So
step
we
at
just
a
asked,
time.
like I said, the original estimate was 600,000 to do the whole entire road the right way. So we used that, I was asking another one of just do concrete spot repairs until we can get the money to do.
Forgive me for not paying attention, did you say we have a Bobcat?
Yeah, we got about it.
Does that have like it seemed like one time we had, and maybe I'm just hallucinating, that had like the brush street sweeping attachment for that?
I think we do.
I realize that's not what we're talking about right now, but, was just thinking if periodically we could run that down Main Street here at least, cause it seems like cigarette butts and stuff blows up against the curbs and just kind of looks unattractive, and it's kind of our nice areas to pretty it up in this one.
Keep the crown jewel shining.
How much do we have in that street fund now?
Street fund is 94,563 as of the second.
Now, and with weather being bad, the best time to do is during the spring, especially now getting cold weather. Concrete, fix it, reasonable low. my plan is, let's say, contractor comes back, and this is gonna be a rough proposal from him, this will give you guys some numbers, because like I said, we will have to, if you guys decide to go with public works, or you guys decide to go with the contractor, you know, then we can put up the bid and do the right procedure, right?
And hopefully by spring too, we'll have a little bit more money in the account, that 1%'s kicking in.
Like I said, the biggest unknown, even the contract said, the biggest unknown is once you get it dug up, what that subbase is gonna look like.
We won't know till it's dug up.
And he also, with maybe the idea, he also suggested this, like I said, the most open narrow, that if public works are gonna do, is got to do it in phases, half at a time, and come back down to the other half. Well, he's like, you know, he said he could get started early in the morning and do a high ability rise concrete, which was set up in 2 hours and be drivable in 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
So, he, you know, so, but like I told him that an option too, but he's very aware that he don't got the job, it's not, you know, guaranteed, it's just the estimate, and we'll have to get the proper bidding before we decide to go that direction.
Just out of curiosity, with the public works that we have in town, do you think that they're, I don't want to sound rude, but knowledgeable enough to be able to work the concrete and perform the job that we got? Okay, cool.
No, like I said, there's only 3 of them, and it's gonna be at least a 2-week project,
Right.
between parks. It's gonna be done right away, you know, potholes, water troughs.
And they're fighting the weather too, so.
I was just merely out of curiosity.
Now, one thing we might have to look at here in the near future, after we get some funds built back up, is put you in a small mini excavator, so we can start doing on water main cables and stuff like that, really got down to this.
Well, we've got some potholes around here that'll start tearing up some front ends if we don't get them filled.
Yeah.
Just so we can drive on them versus, you know, maybe spending a lot of money in one area, they're all over the place. The people are gonna start blowing tires.
Anything else on Hudson Street? Not, elected officials' comments?
I just want to ask Joe, probably should have this on the agenda, but do we have an adequate amount of sand and salt sand on?
Oh, yeah.
In,
We
in
got,
out right there?
we got over 3,000 gallons of salt brine, and then our whole salt, we just got 25 tons of salt, so our whole salt bin that you have been
Right.
is filled to the front.
And the other thing was, how deep of a snowfall triggers the plows to start moving?
I'm old school on that, and my theory is if you can push it off with the plow, you just plow down, you
You're
push it
talking
off.
about 2 inches, 1 inch?
1 inch,
I know at one time I thought we had, an amount,
yeah,
but I didn't know if that was still true.
yeah. Like I said, I tell my guys that, you know, by the freeze treatment, salting, if it's coming down, if you can drop your plow down, it can be plowed off, stop plowing.
So they're on call, or at least somebody is,
Yeah, they're all on call.
and we've got 3 trucks.
We got 2 trucks that can do salt and sand, and then we got the pickup that we used to put the, plow on, and then we just load it back up with weight so it can help plow.
Okay. I knew we had the 2 Dodge diesels, I didn't know if there was another one.
Yeah. It's that old Ford,
Yeah.
3/4 ton pickup.
Okay.
It's got a plow for it, but it has no spreader. So we just,
We're still using heat juice, right?
yeah, we use that whenever we can.
Stuff doesn't work.
But yeah, we just got shipment back for, oh, okay, a couple months we ordered shipment, so the tanks are full, and like I said, it's all big, so.
Great.
Anyone?
I was wondering if we look into maybe hiring a part-time code enforcement person. I feel like that there's several things going on in our city that need to be addressed that didn't let go too long.
Such as.
Oh, I mean, there's a truck having a tree growing out of the back end of it on Central, you know, stuff like that.
Is that for decoration or is that?
Well, you know, I don't know. You know, I think, you know, grass and different things that,
Litter in their driveway.
yeah, that need to be addressed, that just haven't been addressed for years. We used to have code enforcement many years ago.
Usually takes a phone call to the city. Joe will kick somebody in the gear.
Don't we have somebody currently on Public Works who does the code
Yeah,
enforcement?
and like we discussed, Well, when I got hired on, I was public director, and that was my position. And what I was told when I got hired on is it's complaint driven, so
That's what I thought.
if a citizen calls and complains, that's when he goes out and fixes it. Otherwise, he don't just drive around looking for code
Yeah.
violations.
I knew we had a guy, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because then it's like on our website where it says if you have an issue, email here or whatever, and then we'll send somebody to go do their job.
Yeah. And then when I get phone calls from citizens about code complaints, I give them over to Robert, he goes out, checks them out.
Seems like on some of those, we should be proactive and not waiting. I know like the old city hall next to Dollar General, I don't know if that's been moved since August, but on that side, it's like 5 feet tall. And that's right on our main street is one of our, everybody sees it coming and going, and I don't know, I'm sure the city works, people see it, or you see it, it seems like we should be on that and not waiting.
That's a good point, because we finally got that corner cleaned up whenever 11 bought that, it looks really nice down there now. And then we go up the street, and
If they're obvious and right in your face, we shouldn't wait for somebody.
Yeah,
Is that for sale too?
is that an official complaint?
Yes. There you go.
So that's how it works, you just.
Asked and answered. All right, well, folks, I appreciate Alderman Jones for managing the
family
store,
through.
managing the store last week, or last time around at least, and, thank you everybody for your patience